Welcome to the Kind of Thriving show where we talk all things fitness, hormones, neurodivergence, and how to make life actually work for your body and brain. I'm Ellen, a personal trainer, nutrition coach, and mindset coach for women navigating perimenopause, ADHD, and the in-between seasons of life. Today's guest is someone I know you're going to find relatable and insightful. Kintara is a former high school teacher now working as a provisional psychologist with a special interest in ADHD in girls and women. She's walked the path of late diagnosis herself, right in the middle of her fourth university degree, and brings a unique blend of lived experience, research, and real-world support. She's also a mum, a passionate advocate for neurodivergent learners, and someone who really gets the juggle of trying to support others without losing yourself in the process. Kintara, welcome.
Thank you.
What led you to seeking an ADHD diagnosis initially?
Well, I'd suspected for a little while. It was, I was one of those people that was like, we're all a little bit ADHD. Not realizing that I was probably a little bit more ADHD than most. But in 2021, as we were getting towards the end of COVID, I left teaching. So I'd been in the classroom. Sorry, the dogs are here, barreling around. I had left the classroom and everything just kind of stopped for me. And I didn't realize how reliant I was on having someone schedule every minute of my day for me. That was kind of like, I suppose you think about scales and the tipping point, and we often talk about, do I need a diagnosis? What's going to be the benefit of a diagnosis? And for me, it was always, what is the impact on my day-to-day life? And there wasn't, that I could see, a huge kind of negative impact on my day-to-day life. But it was because having someone else schedule every minute of my day and tell me where to go and what I had to do there and very kindly ringing bells for me to start and stop those things was like almost the final straw, the thing that allowed me to keep the rest of it together. So when that went, all of it kind of fell apart for me. And I kind of kept seeing things online, and I kept, I'd been working with neurodivergent kids as a teacher for a long time, and I'd filled in lots of those questionnaires for kids and just going, this feels very familiar. And I just decided that, I needed to know. Things were just starting, I think, to feel overwhelming. I knew, I think, deep down that I was done in the classroom, that wasn't what brought me joy anymore. Actually, that's a lie. Being in the classroom brings me lots and lots of joy. Being in the school system doesn't bring me joy. And I was like, I need to sort this out. So sought the diagnosis and probably did what most of us do, thinking that the psychiatrist was just going to say to me, you don't have ADHD, you're just rubbish at adulting and you just need to buy a planner and get organised.
Familiar.
Yeah, and no, she did not. She was like, well, you tick all of the criteria, so we're marking this as severe.
Okay.
It was,
right.
That's kind of how I got there.
Okay. So once you had to take on some extra mental load of planning your own day rather than having the day planned for you, that was sort of the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak.
It really was. Yeah, it was. It was that extra mental load thing that pushed me over the edge, I think.
Interesting. So when we spoke on the phone, you were talking about when you were interviewing some other female teachers who had been diagnosed with ADHD, and a common theme that came up was masking. So can we quickly talk about what masking is, how it typically shows up for women, and does motherhood exacerbate that in any way?
Yeah, so for my thesis, I did my my psych research thesis on late diagnosed ADHD women, teachers specifically, because they won't let you do research on children in a master's degree. And I was really passionate about trying to find ways to identify girls earlier. So I'm not sure if you're aware, but the average age of diagnosis for boys is 7, and the average age of diagnosis for girls is 36. So
interesting.
It's huge. And I thought, who better to help us recognize little undiagnosed girls in classrooms than women who were in classrooms as teachers and diagnosed who were undiagnosed little girls. So interviewed a lot of them, and I was, in hindsight, I was almost the very, as a child, stereotypical ADHD boy presentation. I couldn't sit still, I was hyperactive, I was always on the go, and I just assumed that everyone else was like that too. But interviewing all of these teachers for my thesis, I found that most of them were classified themselves as good girls and they wanted to be the teacher's pet, and the thought of getting in trouble was just so overwhelmingly awful for them that they were masking all of these things because they wanted the teacher to like them and they wanted to be good and they wanted to be recognized. And I think for so many, that's how we start. We start by being good girls and it just continues into our adult lives. We don't want to rock the boat. We don't want to be troublemakers. I partially joke that I spent more time in the principal's offices as a teacher than I ever did as a child because I won't mask and I would rock the boat and I would ask hard questions and I would be impulsive and do things that, that would get me in trouble. And I think, in motherhood, we continue to do that because we're sold this idea that to be a good mother, that you have to put your children first and you have to stay calm all the time and you have to just deal with whatever is thrown at you, and it builds up and it builds up, and it's that really fine balance. Like, my daughter is the other ADHDer in our house, and I learned so much from her because I'm not a physical contact person. I'm not a hugger. I'm the cactus person that's like, don't hug me, please. I married a hugger. We had 2 children who are like physical contactors, and my daughter particularly is like, has to be touching me all of the time. She's now 16 and I still can't sit on the couch next to her without her touching me. And for so long,
Wow.
I would mask how uncomfortable that made me because it was like, this is what she needs and this is what I have to do as a mother. And I stopped working for a number of years, because that's what good mothers do. They stay home with their children. And I was so desperately unhappy doing that. And I think, we do. We pretend that all of these things, we're doing it for the children. Whereas now, it's like, and I think I said this to you when we chatted before, the diagnosis for me almost gave me permission to drop that mask and to say, stop touching me. Like, I just need people to stop touching me, or I just need, you're not watching that television, I need you to turn it off, or the lights are too bright in here, can we just not?
Yeah.
And now I try and remind myself, and when I'm working with other sort of parents because now as, provisional psych, I see a lot of kids who are being diagnosed and say to parents, like, have to model for them how to set boundaries for you, but also for your kids. And that's okay. Like, we're allowed to set boundaries and we're allowed to, talk about the things. And I was the same in the classroom. Once I did go back into schools, and I was very open with my students, with my teenage students, about having ADHD. And a number of them were like, but you've been to university. And I was like, oh my God, is that not allowed? Like, ADHD people not allowed to like get an education? Oh my God, do I have to give all my degrees back? And they were like, it's just really hard. Like, learning school's really hard. And I'm like, yeah, it is really hard, but these are the things that we can do. So I think dropping the mask helps, I don't know, others feel like they can drop the mask as well, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's really interesting what you were saying about kids saying, oh, but you've been to uni and you've got a degree, almost as if they were seeing having ADHD as a limiting factor. So when I was starting to learn more about ADHD and hadn't yet been diagnosed, I joined a couple of women's ADHD Facebook groups, thinking I would find out a bit more about it and maybe I'd relate to some of the people in there.
Yeah.
And what I found was there were a lot of women, I want to say this in a compassionate way, but using their diagnosis as an excuse for shitty behavior. So
Mm.
things like I just can't bring myself to take all the dishes out of my bedroom, but I don't like living with moldy dishes in my bedroom. How can I get around this not being motivated to clean my room? And I think, like, coming from a fitness perspective, it's like you've got to do things you're not motivated to do, whether you're neurotypical or neurodivergent. Sometimes we need to come up with strategies for how to avoid that situation happening in the first place. Like maybe don't eat in your room if that's becoming a problem. And so, where do you think the balance lies between using a diagnosis as an excuse to not do your best at life, but still looking after your own needs and advocating for yourself?
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think it's in part understanding that there are always things in life that we don't want to do, and ADHD brains in particular are just driven by novelty. Like we want novelty, we want new, we want and those things are boring, right? I mean, I'm the first to admit I outsource a lot of the boring stuff in life that I don't like doing. I didn't realize why I outsourced it, but I have a cleaner that comes because I hate cleaning. I hate doing it. I'm not interested in doing it. I'm just going to outsource that. We have like a meal delivery service because I also hate cooking. I'm
Yep.
very good at my job. I'm very good at study. Like I'm not a housewife. That's not who I am. But I think a lot of even the kids that I work with, they have that similar mindset. Like, well, I don't want to do this. This is boring, or this is hard, or why do I have to do this? And it's about we teach them. We call it how to hack your brain to get through those things, and it can be setting timers, it can be like what gives you that dopamine boost. Like as a teacher, the thing I hate most of all is marking is the worst. It takes forever, and like it is just the worst. Any teachers that are listening will be like, yeah, it is. I love planning, I love resource development, I love teaching, but marking is like, oh. And so
I've heard
whenever
that
I
many
mark,
times.
yeah, I will have, and as a fitness person, you probably won't advocate this, but I buy a bag of lollies. And for every paper I mark, I have a lolly. And it's just like, this is what I do to get me through that job that I don't want to do. And we say the same for kids, like what is going to bring you that little dopamine hit? Okay, well, if we can sit and do this for 15 minutes, then we can have a 5-minute break. Let's plan what we're doing in that break so you've got that to look forward to. But yeah, and I see with kids a lot that, like you said, that using the diagnosis to justify shitty behavior. Like, I can't help it, I've got ADHD. And I kind of love being able to throw back at them. Yeah, me too. And you don't see me just punching my mates for fun, do you? Like, and I say to them, imagine, oh, but he's really annoying. And I said, sometimes you guys are really annoying. I just don't go around punching you guys in the classroom, do I? And they're like, no. And I'm like, so it's not like that's not why you're doing this. Like, there is still an element of choice in what we're doing. But yeah, I think sometimes it is, but yeah, other times it is really hard. And I think there needs to be a balance between pushing yourself through to do those things that are hard and that you don't want to do, but also having those days where you're like, you know what, I just don't have the spoons for this. Just like I cannot do this today. Like today, and there are times where I go to bed and the house is a mess and there's washing in the washing machine and I could hang it out, put it in the dryer, and I'm just like, I just don't have the capacity to do that today. And I know there will be consequences tomorrow for not doing that, and maybe after a reasonable night's sleep, I'll be able to manage the consequences for that tomorrow. So I think it is that balance of, being firm with ourselves, but also cutting ourselves a little bit of slack.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. And I guess that balance is different for everyone and it just takes work to find it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And
So
if
talking
people can
about,
afford it, totally advocate like outsourcing the bits that you don't like doing.
yeah, definitely. You touched on housework, and last time we spoke, you said you run your house like a pirate ship with military precision.
Yeah.
What does that actually look like day to day?
I mean, the kids are older now, so my kids are now in year 11 and 12.
Hmm.
So they're
Well,
much more
that's tough.
independent
One of
than
each.
they, yeah, yeah. It was
Wow.
tougher when they were small and 16 months apart. Like that's when it was really chaotic. But, like I've managed to kind of establish lots of routines in the house and spots. Everything has a spot in my house. And it's not because that's my natural state. My natural state is not to be a tidy, neat, organized person with a label maker, right? That is not my natural state. That is one of those choices I make of those things I hate doing. I hate doing those things, but I also hate chaos, right? If my desk is a mess, my brain is a mess. You know, my car's actually putrid. Actually, my husband cleaned it on the weekend, so it's clean at the moment. But, you know, I like my, you know, the areas of my house that people would see when they come over to be clean and tidy and kind of put together. And because I just can't function otherwise. So I do those things that I hate doing. I hate tidying. I hate organising. I often body double stuff like that with my best friend, who's also an ADHDer. So we will literally just message each other and be like, "Hey, you up for a body doubling sesh? I need to clean my study. I need to clean my office at home." She's like, "Yeah." Like one day she was like, "Cool, our credit card got hacked, and we got a new credit card, and I need to update all of the credit card direct debit details on all of our things." So she literally came over, sat on my office floor, she did her thing, I tidied the office, and it was done. So, but yeah, with the kids, I used to on a Sunday, I would make a loaf of bread worth of sandwiches and put them in the freezer. I swear I have more plastic containers than any human being ever, because I hate doing lunches. So I would do over Sunday, I would do a loaf of bread, of ham and cheese and Vegemite and jam, whatever, put it in a container, put it in the freezer. I would do a packet of wraps. I would buy half a dozen Cheesy Mite scrolls from Baker's Delight. I'd buy the cheese and bacon scrolls from Baker's Delight. They all went in the freezer. Then I still have these plastic drawers, like, you know, those cheap plastic drawers that you get from like Kmart or whatever, entry, and each drawer has like a different type of snack. So there'll be like muesli bars and fruit bars and stuff in one, and then like rice biscuits in another, and fruit and whatever. And from when the kids were little, it was like, right, take one thing from each drawer, take a sandwich or something sandwichy out of the freezer, put in your lunchbox, off you go. And I would do that. If I did, you know, a full lot, we'd get 2 weeks of, you know, sandwiches and lunches and stuff. So hated doing it. I didn't enjoy any of that. I don't enjoy it. But I knew that it made the mornings easier for me. Stuff like my kids they still have 5 school uniforms. Right? Is this expensive to set up 5 school uniforms? Yeah, it is. But you know what? I know that I'm not doing washing during the week. Like, it's just not happening. I work full time. It's just not happening. So it's those kinds of things I put in place that, rather than being embarrassed or stressing myself about having to make lunches or forgetting to make the kids lunches or having to put washing on or the kids not having a clean uniform, I was just like, I'm not going to feel the embarrassment and the shame around that I know I would feel if those things happened. I'm actually just going to put these other things in place, you know, for me. As well, like organized-wise, on my desk, I have a massive calendar. Like, it's bigger than A3. It's probably an A2 size. You know those big desk calendars you get?
Yeah.
And that sits under my laptop. So every day when I sit down at my desk, everything is on there. Everything gets written on there. It's on my Google Calendar, on my phone. Now that the kids are older, I invite them to everything that happens. So it's like, my next step is I want one of those skylight calendars. I don't know if you've seen them. They're like a big sort of digital frame calendar. And I want one of those for in the kitchen. Just like, so we can all see what's happening.
Like a Google Calendar, but on the wall.
Yeah, a digital one, and like it's hooked up to your phone. So like if I put something on, you know, my calendar, it goes up. So if the kids are at home, they can see, and the kids can add stuff. And I don't know whether we'd use it. It's probably like, you know, the 500 journals that I've got that, you know, I don't use, but they look really pretty.
Yep.
But yeah, it's all of those kinds of things. And it is like a pirate ship, you know, like the kids are really close in age. We have a permanent dog. We now foster rescue greyhounds. So, you know, there's always 2 dogs in our house. There's the kids I don't think there's one night a week where someone doesn't have something after school.
Okay.
You know, I open my calendar in there and just look at the little widget, and if there's a full white square, I'm like, I've clearly forgotten something. Like, I cannot have
Yeah.
a full day with nothing on. Like, clearly I've forgotten something. What is happening? So, yeah, it's all of those things like that. When the kids were little, I think I used to get probably crankier at them, you know, for running late and because it's sort of, you know, they're 5 minutes late dawdling and, you know, or you get to school and my daughter's like, I don't have shoes on.
Yeah, I've had that.
Or I haven't got my bag, or I forgot to pack my lunch, or, you know, all of those things. But yeah, but none of that, like, people from the outside look and they're like, you're so organized and like everything's just color coded and in its spot and like you're so organized. I'm like, yeah, but it's not natural. Like, that's not my happy place doing those things. My happy place is the result of those things. You know, doing it, I hate it.
Yeah. That's really interesting because I experience similar. People say to me, "You're always so organized, you're always so in control of everything going on." And I'm not. It's like that analogy of the duck, and you see the duck swimming on top of the
Mm-hmm.
water and it looks nice and calm, and underneath the
Ah,
feet are going crazy. And I feel like I'm just keeping my head above water, half the time I'm like, oh no, can I wear yesterday's socks because I forgot to bring my washing in, now it's wet again. And then for someone to say, you're always so organized, I feel like a complete fraud. So,
yeah.
is this part of the masking type of thing, or how do you cope with that?
It could be an element of masking, but I think I've always been real, like I'm a social media junkie. Always on, like, and I'm that annoying person that, you know, when Facebook was starting was like, is doing this and is doing that. And I remember a friend saying to me, she's like, I just love how honest you are, like, about how hard being a mum is. You don't you don't just show the highlight reel. You don't pretend that it's sunshine and rainbows all the time. Like, you will post on Facebook, I'm going to list these kids on Etsy any minute now because they're handmade, they're homemade, they're not going on eBay, like they're collectibles. But she's like, you're so honest about it. And I'm honest about parenting being hard. I'm honest about my house being a mess sometimes. I'm honest about forgetting to do things. And I do that because, like, I hope it helps other people. Even my girlfriend just saying, you know, after she had her first baby, she's like, I just remember that when it's hard, that, like, yeah, Kintara was honest about it being hard and she survived and her kids are almost grown up and they're, like, my kids are beautiful human beings. Like, if they weren't my kids, I would happily choose to hang out with them. Like, they're actually really cool
Yeah,
humans.
that's lovely.
But I think modeling that for them and for other people is really important. Like, my daughter is a horse rider because, you know, she couldn't have picked a less dangerous sport to engage in. And she did a clinic and recently, like a mindset clinic. And she's had issues. She's had anxiety. She's ADHD with the horse ride. There's, you know, a whole thing. But this woman asked her, when do you feel most seen? And she's 16 and she's like, she's going to say never. Like, she hates being seen. She's the masking queen. And she said she thought about it for a long time and she teaches horse riding lessons as well to tiny, tiny people. And she said, when I'm working with one of my students who experiences really significant anxiety and they're really scared about riding. And she said, say more about that. And she said, I tell them how bad my anxiety was. I tell them how scared I was. I tell them how I felt. And she said, showing people all of those awful, terrible, not nice bits of me. She said, if it makes that little person in front of me feel less alone, I'm going to do it. She said, because I felt, when I was going through it, I felt like I was the only person who was so terrified of doing the thing that I loved more than anything else. And I'm just like,
Yeah.
how are you 16? Like, how are you 16 and you have this insight? And I think that's what it is. Like, I suppose I am an advocate for unmasking and being honest about, you know, like, yes, there's this narrative now that ADHD is a superpower and yeah, there are elements of it that are. You know, I wrote my thesis in 3 days. And I got a high distinction on
Wow.
it and a Dean's Award. It was my first ever academic award at 45 during my 5th university degree. My first ever award for doing something at school, right? I rang my mum and I was like, did I
Wow.
ever get awards at school? She's like,
That's
no, I never went to
amazing.
school when you were in trouble. And so, yes, it can be a superpower, right? You're zoning, you're hyper focused. I was like, I had so many documents and journal articles and interview transcripts, and I'd been putting it off and putting it off and putting it off.
Yeah.
And then I was just like, right, school holidays, I'm going to make sure I get up, take my meds, because you've got to remember to do that. And I just locked in for 3 days and wrote 10,000 words in 3 days.
Wow.
So yes, it's a superpower, but it's also shit sometimes. There are bits of it that are hard. There are bits where I can't do the thing. And I joke, if my meds kick in while I'm doom scrolling, that's it. We're doom scrolling all day. It takes a write off. So yeah, I know I'm very upfront and honest about
Yeah.
all of it. About the good bits
Yeah.
and the bad bits. And when my friends say you're so organized, I'm like, yeah, because I have to be, not because I want to be. This is hard work and conscious. This is not my natural state. I hate it, but I hate the feeling of the chaos more.
You know that you're going to reap the reward. So it's a form of caring for your future self rather
Yeah,
than, when we think of self care and it's going and having bubble baths and manicures, but doing
yeah,
things like making 2 weeks worth of sandwiches that you hate doing is also a form of self care
yeah.
because you don't have to do it now for 2 weeks.
I don't have to do it every day. I just do it once a fortnight,
Yeah.
and that's more bearable than 5 days a week.
Yeah.
And it means
Yeah.
I'm being a good mum. My kids are fed. There's food. Yeah, they're eating Vegemite sandwiches or like ham and cheese sandwiches, whatever. Like they're fed. You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if they don't like
Excellent.
it, they're now old enough to make something themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
But yeah, I think that's
I
it.
think I
Self care
stopped
looks
making my kids
different.
meals in like grade 4, I think. They had to make their own lunches from then on, but that was actually more effort for me than just doing it myself. I just wanted them to have the skills, and now they're 18 and 20 and they go, I'm not making my own food. I'll go buy it.
Yeah, I'm
And
just
if
gonna
both
buy
got good
it.
jobs, I say, oh, well, if you can afford to buy
Yeah,
lunch every day, go for it. But I'm not making
yeah.
your lunch for you.
That's it.
Yep.
So yeah, I think the more we can be honest about the good bits and the bad bits, and that was one of the things that really came out of the interviews I did for my thesis. One of the teachers I spoke to, one of the questions I asked was about, are you open? Like, do you tell your workplace that you've got ADHD? Do you tell your students you've got ADHD? And one of them was, most of them said yes. There were only 2 out of the 7 I interviewed that said no. One of them said because she was on contract work and she was worried that it might mean she wouldn't get an ongoing position. Said there was no real reason. Like she said, if anyone Googles my name, like they'll know I do lots of advocacy in the space, but I just don't feel like I need to announce it. But the one who said, she tells her students, and I asked why, and she said, because you can't be what you can't see. And she said, growing
Yeah.
up, I wanted to see more quirky women being successful and finding ways to manage and like just to normalize all of the things that she was doing. And I'm like, that's it. Like you can't be what you can't see. And we have to be those women for ourselves. We have to be those women for our daughters. We have to be those women for the young people that we interact with all the time. We have to, we have to be a girl's girl for each other and like, yeah, just because you come over and my house looks tidy, like I ran around like an idiot for 2 hours before you got here to get it to look like this. Like this is not how it looks normally. You know, and yeah, I mean, I often say to my husband, he's real thingy about, the house being tidy and what will people think. And I'm like, you know what? And I quote Dr. Seuss, those that matter won't mind, and those that mind don't matter.
Yeah.
If someone's going to walk in and
Great.
judge my house because because it's lived in, then you're not my people. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Great.
you're just not my people.
I love it. Love it. And it takes a fair amount of, I guess, self confidence to get to that point of realizing that you don't need the approval of people whose opinions you don't really care for anyway. I don't want to go down the path of RSD today because we could go on forever.
Yeah.
But you did talk about modeling and particularly modeling resilience and doing the hard thing. When you're the one doing this modeling and being resilient, how do you also show your self compassion?
I probably don't. I'm harder on myself than anyone else I think has ever been harder on me. I know that I have probably unreasonably high expectations of myself that can often transfer across to having very high expectations of people around me. And, my kids have gotten pretty good at calling me out on that. Like, when they were little, I remember once my daughter was like, I'm only 7. It's like, yeah, okay, fair enough. So, like, there's part of me that, yeah, I do feel like I hold myself to, very high expectations, but also, I don't know, I think just over time, like, I've learnt that, like, done is better than not done. And sometimes, and what is your best varies. I think I say these things to kids so often as a teacher that, I don't know, you say it often enough and maybe you start believing your own bullshit. Like teaching year 12s, I often say to them, I don't need you to be the best. I need you to be your best. And at the end of year 12, that number at the end, I want you to decide what you do next year, not that number to decide what you do next year. And I think, yeah, you say it often enough. Like even at uni now, I'm in my final year of a psych degree and psych is hard. Like I don't know if people realize how full on it is. It's that, I had a master's degree already in gifted education, and the grad dip, which is undergrad level psychology, was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Like it was so hard. And then it's so competitive to get into fourth year and fifth year. So it's not a P's get degrees situation, at that point. It is you need to be getting distinctions, high distinctions, have a great application, do a great interview, have a great CV with experience to kind of get through. So I had to work really hard. But now I'm in that final year, there's kind of nothing else, right? I literally am out the point where I have to pass. And so I've given myself that space to be like, you just need to do the thing to get the piece of paper. And my marks have never been better. Like, it's ironic that now that I've sort of almost taken my foot off the accelerator and got, like, even with my thesis, there was no desire or no expectation of a high distinction on that. My supervisor said to me in our first meeting, she said, what do you want to get out of this? And I said, I just want to pass it and get the piece of paper and do the things. Like, I'm just ready to be a psychologist. That's what I want to do. And she was like, cool, let's just work on getting it done then and getting the pass and like get a high distinction on it. So I think, yeah, I think those things happening also just reinforce that idea that when I am a bit kinder to myself and when I take that pressure off a little bit, good things happen.
Amazing.
And sometimes, yeah, I also found after I left teaching, like when I left the first time, I left with nothing to go to. And I was on a top level teacher salary, which, teachers should always be paid more, but it was definitely very much a living wage. And that was gone. And I had nothing to, and there was the panic, but all of a sudden, all of these amazing offers just came my way of new and interesting things that I'd never done before. I stepped into the tertiary space, like it started as going and observing half a dozen pre-service teachers on placement and sitting in the back of their classroom and making notes, which ended up observing hundreds of pre-service teachers. And then it was like, we need someone to just teach this unit on literacy. Like, do you reckon you could teach this literacy unit? And I'm like, yeah, okay. And, do you reckon you could teach this unit? And like, so, and it just kind of grew from there. And it was like, I think that was a big wake up. When you, kind of create space for things to happen, good things will come. But I think there's an element of keeping myself so busy that I often missed things.
Yeah, that makes sense. If you are so busy, you wouldn't be noticing these opportunities come along, even if they were. And do you think that by staying busy, that was you were trying to live up to some kind of expectation that you'd placed on yourself to
Yeah.
be productive. Yeah,
Yeah. 100%.
yeah.
And I've worked with, therapists and life coaches and stuff before. And even my husband has said to me, like, what are you trying to prove and who to? Like, and I'm like, I actually don't know. And I remember, I don't know if you're familiar with Em Rossiano. She's like a comedian. She's got ADHD and autism, and like she's amazing. And she's podcast as well. And on one of her pods, she talked about that she almost never lets herself enjoy achievements that she achieves. She works really hard for something and does the thing, and then she's on to the next thing, like, straight away. She doesn't sit and enjoy the achievement. And I was like, that was like a light bulb for me. I was like, that's me. I literally don't feel proud of anything I've done. I don't like, and people are
And
like,
you've done so many amazing things.
I'm on my 5th university degree. Like, I was the first in my family to finish high school. I was the first in my family to go to university. Like all of these things that I haven't felt proud of because it's this constant what's next? What's next? What do I have to do next? And yeah, my husband will say to me, like, when is enough enough? Like, what is it that you want? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, when will you feel satisfied? And I'm like, I don't know, and then when people praise me for the things that I've done, I get really uncomfortable, and I'm like, can we not do that? Like,
Yeah, I get that.
but yeah, that was a moment. So when I did get the Dean's Award for my thesis, I did put it on social media, and I'm like, I never feel proud of my achievements. I never allow myself, and I'm really trying to force myself to sit with this and put it out there and let people go, well done, like, you should be so proud of yourself, and just go, actually, yeah, like, I did go into that just wanting a pass on it, but I actually really enjoyed that, and I'm really, like, it really fired me up. Now I'm working with my supervisor, now kind of editing it, and we're looking at submitting it for publication.
Great.
So that would be really exciting. And yeah, and I've promised my daughter she wants to be a vet, which means she'll have to do a doctorate of veterinary medicine. And she said to me, if I do a doctorate of veterinary medicine, you also need to do a PhD, so that both the ADHD women in our house are doctors and the men are just plebs. So there could be a PhD in my future, because I've promised my daughter if she has a doctorate, then I will have one as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, that would be the 6th degree, and I think that would have to be the last one. I don't know that my next step will allow much more.
And what do you do once you've got to that level? That's conquer the
I don't know.
world.
Well, that's it. Like, is that where I'll feel enough? Like I don't know. I don't know. And again, it's that vulnerability of maybe normalizing it. Like, maybe, yeah, there are people listening who are like, yeah, I also never feel proud of my achievements or allow myself to sit with that. And I think it's the dopamine, right? The dopamine comes from the working hard towards something, and then once you've got it, it's gone, and you're like, oh, the dopamine's dropped. Now I need to be working at something. Like, I constantly need to be working and striving.
Yeah, what's the next thing?
Yeah, what's the next thing that's going to give me the dopamine hit?
Yeah. Yeah. So, just one last question.
Yeah.
If there's a woman who's listening or watching and something today has landed and she has realized that she's actually not showing herself compassion at all, she's caught up in worrying about everyone else or whose expectations she needs to live up to, what's one thing that she can do today to start the ball rolling with the self compassion?
That's really hard. I feel like I want some kind of like amazing, pithy, punny kind of like motto there. But yeah, I think learn to be comfortable in the uncomfortable, because it changes is uncomfortable and it feels gross. And human nature is to move away from things that make us feel gross. But that's where learning and change is uncomfortable. There is nothing comfortable about changing. You know, it might be scary and exciting, and there are a whole range of other things, but change is uncomfortable. And I think learning to sit in that discomfort and working through that is where change comes and how we can change. But yeah,
Yeah, that's great. That's
yeah,
great. Thank
I think
you.
yeah,
Thanks
that
so
that's
much for
probably it.
chatting today.
No
Yeah,
worries.
that's great. Yeah. So if anyone wants to know more, how can they find you?
To find me, I mean, my name's Kintara. I'm tricky to hide.
You're the only
But the
one.
best place, I know, the best place to get in touch with me is probably, I mean, yeah, you could Google my name, it'll come up, but my business that I run on the side, because of course, studying full time and working and is not enough, parenting, I run a business called Emergence Education. So we generally specialize in supporting neurodivergent children navigate kind of their educational journeys, but we also work to support parents to navigate like their own parenting journey as a neurodivergent parent of neurodivergent kids. So
Yep.
it's probably the best way to get in touch with
Yeah.
me. And then, yeah, if you need me in other capacities, I can direct people that way.
Awesome. Thank you. Hopefully
No
we get to do
worries.
this again one day.